Good morning and welcome to the Qlik Cloud Analytics tour. In this session, we're going to show you the way to sync on-premises data with the Qlik Cloud Storage and keep them synced when on-premise data source changes. Data will be stored in QVD format, and we're going to use those QVD to build a very simple Qlik Sense cloud application. By the end of this session, we have any changes on the premise source data reflected live in Qlik Sense cloud application. We also use a very simple Qlik replicate task, but either the Qlik Sense application and the Qlik Sense replicate task are there only for the demo purpose. We don't want to go deeper in the creation of those two elements, but instead we want you to focus your attention on the integration part. We expect you have a very basic understanding on how Qlik Replicate and Qlik Sense works.
My name is Vincenzo Esposito, and I'm here today with Clive Berman to walk through the cloud hybrid data delivery. Thanks to Ola Meyer and Maya Arpets for the content, which has been reorganized to better fit this session. And this is how we are gonna split the session. First of all, we are going to discuss what are the reason behind the hybrid data delivery. We are going to show the high-level architecture before touch any setting, and set the base terms and concepts around the data delivery in the cloud. We are going to check all the prerequisites before start. Then we start setting up the system. And the first step is establishing the connection between the on-premise enterprise manager and the Qlik Cloud tenant. Once we have the connection done, we can create a simple replicate task and land the data in the S3 bucket. We can move then the data from the landing zone to the storage data asset in a QVD format. And we are now able to create a very simple analytics application starting from those QVDs. And eventually, we can verify any change on-premise source table will be reflected live in the final application. We are living in an age where system data processing are quickly moving to the cloud, and they are offered as a service. This brings a number of advantages, and just to name a few: lower costs, increase scalability and integration, make software maintenance easier, break the company boundaries, and enable a secure productivity while on the move. As the systems are scattered around, data have to move from the producer to the consumer location in a secure and in a scalable way. Moving data across systems in a cloud is not an issue, but still some business relies on on-premise processes which constantly generate data. That's call for a new challenge: turn the on-premise source to a secure and scalable node to consume from the cloud. Qlik advantage of both worlds to offer a unique solution which enables customers to make the most of the cloud offering, but still fully profit on the on-prem data. This slide shows the high-level architecture and the components used in the hybrid data delivery of active QVDs. The process automates the capturing of on-premise data landing them in a raw format in a client-managed cloud storage, an S3 bucket by now, and using this data to create QVDs. Those QVDs are immediately cataloged and available for analytic applications. Users have the option to store those QVDs in a client-managed cloud store or in a Qlik managed cloud store. In your Qlik Cloud tenant, you start by navigating to Data Service. From the Data Analytics home, you open the App Launcher and click Data Service. You also have it available from within the Start with Data. Navigate to Data Service. One click and you are in the Data Service area. The Data Service is a new area in a Qlik Cloud where you create, manage and monitor data assets that auto-generate continuously update QVDs, and in the future also deliver to cloud data warehouse platforms such as Snowflake. You will find here two tabs: Data Services Home and Manage Data Assets. Data Services Home contains basic description of what the hybrid data delivery is. It describes how the data flows from the source through the data services that land it to the cloud as data asset of type landing, and then convert it to QVDs in a storage data asset. Then it can be used as a source in data analytics. In the home page you will find information on how to get started with data services, as well as other app resources such as videos and tutorials. Manage Data Assets tab is where you create, manage, control and monitor all your data assets. Data asset is a fit-for-purpose collection of tables. It is the main unit of work in data services. You create two types of data assets: landing and storage. Landing is used to land and update data from sources database into AWS Cloud. Storage data asset, on the other side, is used to generate QVD files from a landing data asset. QVD files are automatically and continuously updated with data. It can be stored either in a Qlik managed storage or in a customer's S3 bucket. The QVD file can be used for downstream processing by scripting or by analytical applications. Here you can see the data assets that currently exist in the space named Deckle space. You can see its type, landing and storage, and some basic information on each, representing the overall state. So, how does it work? You first need to have a Qlik Enterprise Manager, a Qlik replicate in hand. In the Qlik Enterprise Manager, you configure in advance a task of a new profile and target endpoint called Qlik Cloud Landing. This task will later be used by the data services to actually bring the data from on-premise source to the cloud. Then, in Qlik Cloud Data Services, you create a new landing data asset and associated it with the replicate task that you create before. Upon run, the landing data asset will use the replicate task to do the initial load of the data from the source to the AWS S3 bucket in the cloud, and then data changes will continue to stream on the line. Next, you should create a new storage data asset and select the landing data asset to be its source data from which the QVD file will be generated. Clicking Run on the storage data asset will start a continuous process of once in a while pulling the data from the landing and generating the QVD from it. Pulling the data will be done in a predefined default frequency, perhaps every 3 minutes. In the future, it will be configurable via UI. The storage QVD files can be stored either in Qlik Managed Storage or in a customer's S3 bucket, depends on the user choice. The files will then appear as datasets in the data analytics available from being used as a source for Qlik Sense applications. This requires being granted with a can-consume role on a data space where the corresponding storage QVD data asset resides. So, altogether, you can think of it as a continuous pipeline that starts from the source data, goes through the landing, and ends in the storage QVD files, which are ready for the downstream processing by scripting or analytic app such as the Qlik Sense application. Notice that it is also possible to first design the landing and storage data assets, and once the design is completed, then run both. Data assets do not show up in Data Analytics zone. Instead, the storage QVDs show there as a datasets. Here you can see the storage QVD file appears as a dataset in Data Analytics and available to be used as a source for Qlik Sense applications. What are data spaces? In Data Analytics, you work either in your personal space or in a shared or a managed space. These spaces are used to data analytics content. In Data Services, you work either in your personal space or in a new space type called Data Space, used for data service content. Data Space has a different and enhanced set of roles, comparing to the roles used in Data Analytics, shared and managed space. This is in order to allow more granular control in separating responsibilities. This is how data space look like in a data services. You can filter your data assets by space. And here is how the data space management looks like, with all its roles. What about data resources? In data services, there are two types of resources. Remote Enterprise Manager resource is used by the landing data asset for associating replicate tasks with it, as well as for control and basic monitoring of these tasks. Data connection is used by the storage QVD data asset for connecting to the AWS S3 buckets for the purpose of either reading from the landing area or writing to the customer managed storage area. And this is how data resources look like in the data space. You can see the list of available data connections and Remote Enterprise Manager resources in the space, with some basic information on each. And those are the prerequisites for the hybrid data delivery to work. You need a professional user in a Qlik Sense Enterprise SaaS. Qlik Replicate May 2021 is installed and licensed for the Qlik Cloud landing target and on-premise data source you wish to integrate. A Qlik Enterprise Manager May 2021 is installed with logical access to your Qlik Replicate server. An Amazon S3 bucket with a write access granted to your Qlik Replicate server and a read access to your Qlik Cloud tenant, and an Amazon S3 bucket with write access granted to your Qlik Cloud tenant is also required when you're using your own managed storage for the storage QVD data asset. And now it is time to see all this in practice, so over to you, Clive.
The demo consists of two parts. First, we're going to build the pipeline, and secondly, we're going to run it. Now, when we built the pipeline, we're going to ensure that Qlik Replicate is already installed, and so is Enterprise Manager, and that you have the appropriate access, roles, and privileges for things like an S3 bucket, our data sources, in this case MySQL, and of course the Qlik Cloud tenant. One limitation with this demo is that the analytics application doesn't currently automatically refresh, but we'll fix that in future releases. Building a data pipeline consists of 5 steps. The first step, which is a one-time configuration, ensures that Enterprise Manager can talk to Qlik Cloud. The second step is to build a replicate task that will land our data into an AWS bucket. The third step is to create a landing asset and associate it with a Qlik replicate task, and that's for command and control of the replicate task. The fourth step is to make a storage data asset. That's going to take the data from the S3 bucket and automatically create and update our QVDs. And the last step is to use those QVD files in an analytics application. You'll notice that steps 1 and 2 are performed on premise, and steps 3, 4, and 5 are performed inside of Qlik Cloud. So let's begin by configuring Qlik Enterprise Manager to talk to Qlik Cloud. Here's my Enterprise Manager with Replicate installed. Then I go to Settings and select Qlik Cloud Services Connection. Then I need to type in the tenant address. Next, I need to copy the registration key. Click the Copy Registration Key button, and then we're going to paste that value into Qlik Cloud Data Services. Next, we're going to select the new menu item from the App Switcher, which says Data Services, and that brings us to a new Data Services homepage. In the future, you'll see other data services here, but right now we just have a picture that represents hybrid data delivery. Clicking the Manage Data Asset tab lets us choose the data space that we want to work in. Then we'll click the Data Resource menu item. Scroll to the Add Enterprise Manager Resource button and click it. We'll then add a name and then finally paste in our registration key. And press Close. Notice now how the status says disconnected. That's because Replicate needs to initiate the connection. And so let's switch back to Replicate and do that. Now click Connect. And when the communication is successful, the green check mark will appear. Switching back to Qlik Cloud, we can see that the status has changed to Connected. So that completed the first step in our data pipeline. Now let's do step 2, building a Qlik Replicate task. So to create a new task, we'll go to New Task, we'll select the Replicate server, give it a name, and then you have a new replication profile called Qlik Cloud Landing. And here you see we can do full load or save changes. Click OK. And in this instance, I only need to configure the endpoint because I've already pre-configured the MySQL source. So now create the target endpoint. So we choose new endpoint. We'll give that a name too. Make it a target. And then we choose the new type of Qlik Cloud Landing. And then we just need to enter all of our S3 credentials. And we can choose where we can put it in the folders. I'm just putting a folder name in here, for example. Now test the connection. Everything works. Press Save and Close. Now drag over my target endpoint and save. And for this demo, we're going to set the replicate partition time to about a minute. And the last thing to do for this task is to select the tables I want to replicate. So I'm just going to select all of the tables. Then I'm going to save. With the replicate task built, now let's switch over to Qlik Cloud Data Services and create our landing data asset. That's our third step in the pipeline. To create the landing data asset, we can select from here or from the Add New button here. We can put in a name and note that the data asset type is landing and press OK. Now we just need to select the replicate task. So we choose the Enterprise Manager and the replicate server and the replicate task. And you can see that the next step is to save and catalog. So press catalog now. And cataloging is actually fetching replicate metadata. And it's also creating the directory in the AWS bucket. So here you can see that the bucket is empty. We'll refresh, and we can see that the task is making the directories. And now it's ready to go. The next step then is to run the task, and that will perform the full load first, and then continuously update with changes. And then the status will change to running, and we can switch to replicate to see how the task is performing. So here we can see from the monitor that the task is running. And it's done. So now the landing asset is all complete, and the next step is to create a storage asset to make QBD files. I create a storage asset in exactly the same way that I created the landing asset. So I select Add New Data Asset. I can give it a name, a description, but this time I'm going to change the asset type from landing to storage. I then have to choose my source data. So from my data spaces, I choose the landing asset I just created. Press select. And then I need to choose the S3 connection I'm going to use. Unlike replicate, this could be a read-only connection if required. And if I haven't defined it before, then press the plus sign. So we put in our credentials and test the connection. And I can choose whether I want the QBD files stored in Qlik Cloud or in a different AWS bucket. And I could choose a different folder structure if I'd like to, but I'll just leave it as defaults for now. And press OK. And once again, the next step is to save and catalog the data asset. So we can see that the target is cataloging, and we can see the tables. The storage data asset also has a monitoring tab whereby we can watch the status of the data as it gets delivered from the AWS bucket and turned into QBDs. So we've reached the last step in our data pipeline. We configured Enterprise Manager to talk to Qlik Cloud. We've built our replicate task that delivers the data from our on-premise system to an AWS bucket. We've created a landing asset that will control our replicate task. We've associated made a storage asset with that landing asset, and that fetches the data from AWS and turns it into active QVDs. And the final step is to build our analytics application. So switching back to our analytics services, we can see the QVDs that were just created, and they're in our recent content there. And let's choose one of these QVDs to generate an application. And that's our application using the active QVDs. For the last part of the demo, we'll quickly look at a running data pipeline. We'll manually make changes to our MySQL database. Those changes will be automatically detected by Qlik Replicate. Then they'll be landed in the AWS bucket. Our storage data asset will update the QVD. And then finally, we'll refresh our app and see the changes. So here's our app where we left off, and let's make some changes to the MySQL database. We'll show you how quickly, easily, and automatically the changes are propagated through Qlik Cloud. So we'll do an update of a record. And we'll delete a record. And finally, we'll insert a record. Let's apply the changes. Now let's quickly switch to Replicate. We can see the changes have been applied. Now let's look at the AWS bucket to see how the changes have been applied. Then the storage asset will pick up the changes and make a new QVD. Yes, we can see the changes. And now we'll reload the data. And the application is updated. So that's the end of our demonstration. Thank you.